Hello everybody, it is Zen, and today I've got another book review for you, The Agony of Bun of KEEFE. So, this is another white pine book, as you can see right here. And for those of you that don't know what white pine is, it is a system or thing in Canada, or someplace, I don't know, somewhere in Canada, where you read a couple books and you get to go to an event, or you would have to read 5 books and you get to vote for the best book of the year of the 10 selection of white pine. My school seems to be doing it this year, so I thought why not go ahead and do that, and here I am, second book of white pine. The first one was Black Chuck. You should be able to check out my channel. It's one of the most recent uploads, and you can see that I like that, but if you don't wanna, I'll spoil it for you and just say I got a 3 out of 5 on that. It was a terrible beginning, garbage. I hated the beginning so much. Lots of people I know read the beginning, they're like, ugh. And then you get to the ending, and the ending's actually quite masterfully written, so if you can slog past the beginning, the ending is worth it. This one, however, is one that I was very much looking forward to, because this is one of the higher rated ones on Goodreads, which is like it's like a 4 stars or something. And I was really excited, because most of these books I hear are pretty trash. It's white pine, you know, what can you do? They're all very preachy about the human culture, and it's like, I don't want to read about that. I want to read about something cooler. But this book is very similar to that. Now, I know that this isn't exactly the typical book in white pine. White pine generally has some very stronger cultural pushes with their books, and that's one thing. I don't care for that at all, but you know, yet this one was slightly different, and I found that quite interesting, because in this book it was more of a simplistic tale. It started off going through, I think the first half of the book, or more than maybe two-thirds or something, was more or less a very, very simplistic fairy tale-ish story. It's not fantasy at all, but it felt like a fairy tale in the way it was being told. Very, very simple, very straightforward story. There was very little on the story that was actually, you know, odd, that I didn't understand very well, but it's a very simple story, and I really enjoyed that sense of storytelling. You know, I was able to pick it up, and I finished it in 2 days. Technically speaking, not technically, but 1 day, because I read like 10 pages on the first day, and that was a pretty good, you know, pretty good shot for me. And it's a very, very simplistic tale. You can see, even though it's a very short page count, the amount of words on a page isn't very much either. It's a very, very short story, and I really, really like this because of that. As I noted before, white pine has this little bit of an issue of preaching to people about social issues, and I'm not a huge fan of that, because I'm like, okay, how about you consider both sides of the issue, and then you like kind of consider both sides. But this is kind of, most of the white pine books are like, let's say this exists and nothing else, and obviously don't even question it. And I don't like that. And although this book does have that in it, I don't have a big problem with it, because it was such a small portion of it. It's not a big issue. It happened once in a while, and it was like, stop, but it really had no influence on the plot, and I'm really happy how we kind of just breezed over it. We just left, because I didn't want to linger on that too much. It kind of got iffy at some points, and you know, it's a very solid story because it kind of breezes over the non-important things. Instead, it focuses on the relationships this character makes with other characters. In terms of characters themselves, I really, really think that this book excelled in that category. The characters in this book were phenomenal. I could tell that, you know, even with simplistic storytelling, this book was supposed to have very basic characters, and it did. Like, from what we could see, they had very basic characters, except for Bun O'Keefe, which in herself, she's a very basic character, but you can tell that you can learn a lot from her just because of how many layers she has, just kind of diving into it without going too far past the surface level. And every single character in this, although simplistic in how we know them, you know that they're simplistic because we don't even know their real names. A lot of them have very like they're not really names. They've got odd stuff. For example, one of them is called, okay, well, there are that are called Chris and stuff like that, but there is one that's called the Big Eyes Girl or something, and we don't even know her real name. All we know is that she's the Big Eyes Girl, and we know that. And because of that, you can tell that the author, Heather Smith, really, really wants us to have a very basic idea of the characters. Yet still, we are able to pinpoint a lot of stuff that goes deeper in the characters. Storytelling itself, not too much deeper, but the characters, incredible. I love that. In terms of what actually goes down in this book, it's an odd book. I'm not exactly sure what happens, but a lot of small things happen, and a couple of big things. And, you know, I just reviewed this right before reviewing the Agony of Bun of KEEFE, and I know that this book, I said that there's very little going on in this book in terms of actual substance, but a lot of small stuff goes on. That's all fine and dandy, but this is a 900-page book, you know? You gotta have some more big stuff. In this, enough big stuff happens. I think roughly the same amount. That this kind of has the same content as that giant 900-page book, and this is tiny. So I'm happy about that, and I'm really happy that, you know, I read this in one day, basically. So I'm happy that I was able to get through this in one day, because usually I don't just read books for a long time. This one was a special book, and I got really interested in it, and although very little technically went down, it was interesting enough, and there was enough small stuff, it was fast-paced enough that I was able to just swing through all of it, and it really got me thinking as well, which is very odd. I don't think much. There's nothing in there, really. I think that the biggest issue I actually have with this book is, in its own ways, the simplicity. The simplicity was wonderful, and I love that about it, but because of the simplicity, there's also a couple downfalls with the book. For example, although the characters are deep, the plot itself, you can't dive deep into it. There's not much going on in the plot itself. And although, you know, the characters is adequate, for it to be remembered as an incredible book in my mind, there needs to be plot going down. Characters is one thing, but to me, it's secondary to the plot, although, you know, that varies for a lot of people. But for me, the plot is the number one. And not much goes down in this book, really. Not too much. It's adequate, and I enjoyed it, but nothing too deep and nothing awesome. And another thing is that because this is such a short and simplistic book, a lot of bigger topics are not dived into. For example, the political, social topics that I was talking about before, although they are kind of mentioned, I have a problem with them being enforced fully with no thoughts or anything like that going along with it. But if this book could have dived into the questions of these, kind of like questioned these moralities, the lines of morality, the gray in between, stuff like that, and kind of pushed, at least if that was the lesson they were going for, they could have pushed that. I feel like I could have learned a lot more. It would have stuck in my mind a lot more. But just because of the simplicity of what Heather was going for, it just didn't make that, and that's unfortunate. But I understand why it doesn't do that, and I think it's totally fair. But yeah, it sucks, because that would have been really awesome. Okay, yeah, there's really not too much for me to review about this book. It's really small, and it's in honesty, I think it might be the best of the White Pine books. Just hypothetically, I think I'm gonna be reading 3 more of them, maybe. Mosaic is for sure. Some Catching the Light, I think, is another one. Stuff like that. Some of the higher rated ones I'm gonna be going for. But you know, this is probably going to be my favorite. It's very simplistic, very storytelling-like, and very deep in terms of the characters all the same. So I'm happy about that, and I'm happy I read this book. So if you're reading White Pine, let me know in the comments down below, and let me just rate this book as a 4 out of 5, which means I would happily read this book right again, but I really don't care for it after reading it too much. I've read it, it's good, I'll just... Okay, next, you know? So, thank you for watching this review. If you're going to be doing White Pine, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you have read this book, tell me what you thought of it. And, thank you guys for watching. Hit a like if you enjoyed and subscribe for another video in the future. I post every single week. And so, thank you for watching. Again, haha. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.